Hello everybody. So welcome back to part 2 of the topic classical encryption techniques. This is part of the course Cryptography and Network Security, which is offered to 7th semester Beta Computer Science students under the curriculum of APJ Abdul Kalam Technological University. We had already discussed in part 1 of the session some of the classical encryption techniques, that is the Caesar cipher, the monoalphabetic cipher, and Playfair cipher. In this session, we will be studying the rest of the substitution techniques, and we will be also discussing the transposition techniques in this part. Moving to the next cipher, Hill cipher. Okay, so in Hill cipher, they use matrices to encrypt and decrypt. So basically, you should have or you should refresh the operations that you used to do with matrices, finding the determinant, finding the inverse of a matrix, etc. Okay. Similarly, you should have some grip in modular arithmetic. So here I will be just giving a slight uh, description of how to find what is mode 26, how to find the modulus, and how do you find the inverse of a number. In detail, we'll be studying about this in module 3, where we discuss about number theory and modular arithmetic. Okay, just to understand how the cipher works, I'll be discussing certain things. So I'll be giving a detailed explanation in my slides so that will be helpful for you. So basically, modular arithmetic. Modular arithmetic is for A mode B, divide A by B and take the remainder. So 14 mode 10, you get 4 as the remainder. 24 mode 10, the quotient will be 2 and the remainder will be 4. Okay. This is a modulus theorem, which we'll be using as we proceed further. For an integer A and modulus M, let R be the remainder of A by M. Okay, so you will be taking the modulus of A by M. Then the residue R of a modulus M is given by R if A is greater than or equal to 0. Then you are taking M minus R if A is less than 0. That is, if you are if you are getting a negative number mode M, then you will be doing M minus this remainder. And if it is equal, to 0 if A is less than 0 and R is equal to 0. That is, if I am doing 24 mode 4, then the remainder is 0. So the residue also will be 0. So this is the modulus theorem. Now, some examples are 80 mode 26. Okay, so it goes 3 times and the remainder is 2. Okay, 80 greater than or equal to 0. So 80 mode 26 is 2. Next is minus 80 mode 26. So what you have to do is minus 80, it is less than 0 and 2 is not equal to 0. So basically what you have to do is, what will you get when you do 80 by 26? Remainder is 2, right? So you will be doing 26 minus 2, so 24. So minus 80 mode 26 is 24. Then how much is minus 52 mode 26? So minus 52 mode 26 means you will be taking the operation 52 by 26. So 26 into 2 is 52. So the remainder is 0. But minus 52 is less than 0. And minus 52 more 26 is 0 itself. So this is based on that modulus theorem. Okay. Now regarding the inverse. See, if you are taking any number, inverse of 2 is 1 by 2. Why is it 1 by 2? Because when you are considering numbers, see, the multiplicative identity of a number is actually 1, right? That is, you know that multiplicative identity, additive identity is 0, multiplicative identity is 1. So when you are multiplying a number by its inverse, you should get answer as 1. That is the general principle. Okay, so I am telling the multiplicative inverse of 2 is 1 by 2. Similarly, if I am considering a matrix, then A into A inverse is the identity matrix, where that identity matrix is considered as the multiplicative identity in the case of a matrix. Okay, so modular inverse for mode M means A into A inverse mod M should give you 1. And this is a very important principle that you have to uh, uh, look into. You will be concentrating more in module 3 again. So here, the multiplicative inverse of A mod m exists only if A and m are relatively prime. Or relatively prime means if I am considering the greatest common divisor of A and m, it should be 1. They are called coprime numbers or relatively prime numbers. So here I will give you an example. See, what is 1 mod 26? What is the inverse of 1 mod 26? So every operation we are doing in mod 26. The reason is you are dealing with characters. You have mapped the characters from the number 0 to 25. You will not be accepting any number greater than 25. So in order to limit your range within 0 and 25, you are making use of this modulus operation, because mod 26 always gives you answer in the range 0 to 25. That is the main aim of using modular arithmetic here. So what is the inverse of 1? So question is, see, whichever is my inverse, hmm, suppose I am taking 1. 1 into some number, hmm, mod 26. I'm using this operator, mod mod 26. It should give me the answer 1, which is the multiplicative identity. What is the answer? 1. Hmm? Similarly, I want to find the multiplicative inverse of 2 mod 26. Okay, 2 mod 26. That is 2 into any number modulus 26 should give me 1. Can you find any number when multiplied by this 2 give you a 1 as a reminder when you divide it by 26? 2 into 13 is 13 into 2 is 26, right? 26 more 26 is 0. 14 into 2 is 28. 28 more 26 is 2. You will be, you will never get a multiplicative inverse for 2. That is why you told that you can find a multiplicative inverse of A mod m only if GCD of A and m are, GCD of A and m is 1. So what is the GCD of 26 and 2? The greatest common divisor, is it 1? Are they relatively prime? No, they are not relatively prime. So that is why you are not able to find the inverse of 2. So the question is, you will have to find which all numbers are relatively prime to 26. Hmm? Which all numbers in the range 1 to 25 are relatively prime to 26, more 26. Who all are there? 1 will be there. 2 is not coprime. 3 is coprime. That is, if I am considering GCD of 26 and 3, I will be getting 1. There are no other factors. Then 5 is coprime to 26, 7, 9, 11, 15, 17, 19, 21, 23, and 25. If you are considering any of these numbers that is listed here, you will definitely find that the GCD of those numbers and 26 is 1. Only for those numbers you are able to find inverse. So there are methods for finding inverses. So here we will be going for the most simplest method in this case, like you will be talking about in this case, um, like what is the inverse of 3? Hmm? So you will be writing, see, 3 into hmm, some number. Hmm? You multiply 3 with some number and you take modulus 26. you should get the answer as 1. Go for a trial and error. You can see that, see 3 into 3, 9, 9 more 26, 3 into 4, 3 into 5. What about 3 into 9? 3 into 9 is 27, right? What is 27 more 26? You will be getting 1. So 9 is the multiplicative inverse of 3. Similarly, 5. Hmm? That is, you multiply some number with 5 and you perform mod 26, you should get 1 as the answer. What is 21 into 5? 21 into 5, you will be getting 105, right? What is 105 mod 26? You will be getting 1 as the remainder. Okay, so this is the multiplicative inverse. Hope you could see this, and you can see that the value that you get here and the value that you get here are they are just rearranged, that's all. If you are considering the inverse of these one, see, you can see the answer that you have got here, all these elements, they are the same elements that you have written here, only difference is their order is changed. That is all. That is the beauty of modular arithmetic and finding the inverse, and that is why number theory, modular arithmetic, and linear algebra, they have taken, linear abstract algebra have taken a very good power over cryptography. Okay, so coming to an example, in this case, find the modular inverse of 9 for mod 26. So you have already found 9 into 3 is 27, 27 mod 26 is 1, so 3 is the modular inverse of 9 mod 26. Okay. Next is regarding some matrix operations. One matrix you need to encrypt, you need another matrix to decrypt, and it must be an n by n matrix. They should be invertible matrices. So there are conditions for invertible matrices that also will be discussed. And the decryption matrix must be modular inverse of encryption matrix in mode 26. So how will you find the modular inverse of a matrix? So the method is explained here. You have to calculate the determinant of the matrix A, that is the original key matrix. Okay, and make sure determinant A has a modular inverse for mode 26. I told you a particular element, the determinant is a single value, right? You have to make sure that that element is co-prime with this 26. If it is not co-prime, then there is no point in proceeding further, because you will never get an inverse matrix for performing decryption. So make sure that determinant A has make sure that determinant A has an inverse that exists. Then you have to calculate the adjugate of A, then multiply that by modular inverse of determinant A, that is finding the inverse. Calculate mode 26 of the result to get B. So B is the decryption method. Use A to encrypt, B to decrypt. Very simple. So you can see an example. See, look at A. This is a matrix that is already given to you. You remember? So again, rewind to your school days or your plus 2 days, how to find the determinant. Okay. I am considering a small matrix, a 2 by 2 matrix. So determinant is 2 into 4 minus 1 into 3. So 8 minus 3, 5. So your aim is to find a decryption matrix B. Before proceeding into doing all the calculation, the first thing you have to do is there an inverse for 5 mod 26? Is there an inverse? The condition to be checked is the GCD of 5 and 26 1? Yes. We have already found in that table 21 is the inverse of 5, because 5 and 26 are already co-prime or relatively prime. So definitely an inverse exists mod 26. And you will be doing an operation and find that 21 is the inverse of 5 mod 26. So modular inverse of 5 mod 26 is 21. Now your aim is to find B, because A is used for encryption. After encrypting on the receiver side, the receiver should decrypt, right? For that he needs B. So how will you find B? So the method to find B is you multiply this modular inverse, that is 21, to the adjugate of this. So finding the adjugate or adjoint of this is, see, for a 2 by 2 matrix, it is simple. You remember the cofactor method. You can just refresh that by looking into any of the textbooks or the materials available on that. Currently, I am talking about 2 by 2 matrix. An easy way to find the adjoint of this one is, you will be interchanging this one. See, 2 and 4 becomes 4 and 2. You are interchanging these two diagonal elements. And the other opposite element, you are just changing the sign from positive to negative. So you got it. Hmm? You can do it, otherwise you will get the same answer. You just interchange the main diagonal elements, and the other diagonal you just give the negative sign of it. So you multiply this 21 into 4, 21 into minus 1, 21 into minus 3, 21 into 2, you get this matrix. Okay. But remember, all the operations should be done mode 26, because you do not have any point in getting this 84, 63 and all. Your aim is always to get elements between 0 and 25. Then only you can translate those numbers to alphabets. See, when you're giving a plain text, you have to get the ciphertext also in terms of characters, not numbers. That is why you are always concerned with modulus 26. So our job is not over. Finding mode 26 for each of these elements. 84 mode 26 is 6. Minus 21 mode 26 is 5. Minus 63 mode 26 is 15. You can use the modulus theorem and do it by your own to get these values. Therefore, 6, 5, 15, 16. Look at the range of values. All these values have come down to the range 0 to 25, right? So this is the modular inverse of 2, 1, 3, 4. So this is the matrix used for encryption, and this is the matrix used for decryption. So that is the main thing that you want in a Hill cipher. Next one is, how will you encrypt a given text? So you will be given a particular text, and how will you convert that to numbers, and you will be basically manipulating with vectors here, right? So what is a step to be followed? Assign each letter in alphabet a number between 0 and 25. You know, A is 0, B is 1, etc. Z is 25. Change the message into a 2 by 1 letter vectors, that is 2 rows and 1 column, and change each vector into 2 by 1 numeric vectors. That is, you have a mapping, right? So you convert them to numeric vectors. Multiply each numeric vector by the encryption matrix, that is A. Then convert the product vectors back to letter, that is encryption. So an example, this is the first mapping that you do. A to Z, you substitute it with numbers. You want to encrypt the message hello world. So what you do is, you are converting that to a 2 by 1 matrix, because here the input that we have is a 2 by 2 matrix, right? So here you have an n by n matrix. So I'll be converting that into an n by 1 vector. So that means 2 rows and 1 column. So HE, I'll be writing it as HE, a 2 by 1 vector, LL, OW, OR, LD. I have converted that plain text into 2 letters each, and I have written it as a 2 by 1 letter vector. Now I want to convert it to the numbers. See, look, H is 7, E is 4, L is 11, again L is 11, that is our substitution. O is 14, W is 22, D is 3, etc. So you convert a 2 by 1 letter matrix to a 2 by 1 numerical vector. Hmm? Call it as a vector. Now what you have to do is, this is our main multiplication element, that is our key, A, 2, 1, 3, 4. What you do is, you will be multiplying this 2, 1, 3, 4 into 7, 4. You take each 2 by 1 vector, you multiply it with A. So what will you get? It is 2 into 7 plus 1 into 4, 14 plus 4, 3 into 7 plus 4 into 4, that is 21 plus 16. So for better, it is a self-explanatory slide actually. So you can refresh your memories here itself. So you do a multiplication and you will get the answers like this. Okay, 18, 21 plus 16, 37. So you started with 7, 4. You multiply it with 1, 2, 3, 4 and you get a 2 by 1 ciphertext. Now what is my next step? Given hello world, I cannot just give back 18, 37, 33 and all. So remember, these values are not enough for me. Why? Why am I not satisfied with these values? I'm supposed to convert these to letters, right? So to which range did I map A to Z to? 0 to 25. But look here, I have elements greater than 25, 37, 77, 33. What will I do with these numbers? To which character will I convert to? So remember, we are not done with, you have to do a mod 26 operation. So what you do is 18 mod 26, 18. 37 mod 26, just take the remainder 11. 33 mod 26, 7. 77 mod 26, 25. This goes on. So look at these cases. All these vectors were converted to vectors whose elements are in the range 0 to 25. Now I know how to convert these numbers to characters. So look, I have converted those to characters. SL 725 to HZ 24A. This is easy to recollect because 0 it denotes A. 24 is Y. So 240 YA. 196 TG. 2519 ZT. That means your hello world plain text has been encrypted to SLHZY ATGZT. Fine. This is the encryption process. Now, next comes the decryption process. That is, given this SL, HZ, YA, etc., how will I get back hello world? The next one, decryption. You have to change the message again into 2 by 1 letter vectors. Change each vector to 2 by 1 numeric vectors. Then you have to multiply each numeric vector by the decryption matrix. Remember our decryption matrix is B. What is B? B is nothing but you are taking the determinant, you check whether an inverse exists. If so, you multiply that determinant with the conjugate of that matrix and you do a mod 26 operation, you have B with you. So I am taking that. So this is my ciphertext. So I have converted it to SL, HZ, YA, TG, ZT. The reason why I have confined to 2 rows is I am using a 2 by 2 key matrix. What I do is I convert them to numeric. S is converted to 18, L is 11, H is 7, Z is 25, R substitution. That is A to Z is consecutively mapped to 0 to 25. Now, what should I do? I should multiply it with B. Remember, for encryption, I used A 2134 and at the initial slide, I told you the inverse of 2134 is 6, 5, 15, 16. That is used for decryption. So I multiply 6, 5, 15, 16 with this 18, 11 and I proceed with to get these values. You can definitely see here they do not fall in the range 0 to 25. So you will have to do a mod 26 and I get the values in my required range 0 to 25. What should I do? I should convert them to characters. So I'll be getting HELLOWORLD. That means given the ciphertext, I got back the plain text hello world. This is Hill cipher. Okay. So creating valid encryption decryption matrix is the most difficult part of Hill cipher. Here you are dealing with a 2 by 2 matrix. Things were pretty simple, but as the dimension of the matrix increases, then the difficulty level also increases. So apart from that, the Hill cipher uses simple linear algebra and modular arithmetic, nothing else. Only multiplication of matrices, finding determinant, finding the inverse, nothing else. So the difficult part is only in determining the matrices. Still, after years of constant effort, this was also broken by the cryptanalysis. Next is polyalphabetic substitution cipher. So I think you remember in part 1 we discussed monoalphabetic substitution. See, in monoalphabetic substitution what happened was, see, every character was mapped to a particular character. There was no relation between the character as in Caesar cipher. But if I take A, wherever I can find A, that will be substituted with the same substitution letter. If I have B substituted with X, then wherever in my ciphertext I can find X, that means it is B. So one particular character is always substituted to another character. That is monoalphabetic. That was the reason why the redundancy of the language got exploited and that became a failure. Whereas in polyalphabetic cipher, what happens is at one part A will be substituted with say Y. Again, after some time, if A is encountered again, that will be substituted with another letter B. So there is no question of same letter being mapped to the same letter again and again. That is polyalphabetic substitution. So it definitely improves the security because more because you are substituting it with different letters. Okay, the simplest polyalphabetic substitution cipher is called Wigner cipher. Okay, and here key is multiple letters long. If you have a plain text, definitely you have your mapping, right? A to Z is mapped to 0 to 25. Okay, I'll give you an example directly. See, look at this Wigner cipher. You have to write the plain text out. See, this is the plain text. We are discovered. We are discovered. Save yourself. This is our plain text. Now I have a key with me. Key is deceptive. Okay. So what I should do is I should repeat this key as long as I reach the end of this plain text. So deceptive, writing it twice, thrice, it helped me to reach the end. Again, if I have some more characters, I will be writing D, E, C. Sometimes after writing D, E, C, the number of plain text got over, then stop there. So you have to repeat the keyword deceptive until you reach the end of the plain text. Now, how will you get the cipher text? Basically, you have to add the values, the numbers corresponding to this one and do a mode 26 operation. For easiness, I have given the substitution. D is 3. Here I'll take a pen. D is 3. Okay. Then you add it with W. Okay. What is W? W is 22. This is simple substitution. Okay. W is 22. So what is 22 plus 3? 22 plus 3 is 25. Remember, I have to do a modulus operation. So what is 25 mod 26? It is 25 itself. What is the character corresponding to 25? Z. So look what I have substituted it with Z. Similarly, the second one, E and E. So I'll be adding E and E, which is 4 plus 4, 8. 8 more 26 is 8. So the character corresponding to 8 is I. That means you are adding the corresponding plain text and key characters, doing a modulus 26 and converting that number to its corresponding character. So this is how a Wigner cipher works. So look at the advantage of this polyalphabetic substitution. I'll show the beauty of it. Still, it has some disadvantages. So you can see E repeated, as we have seen the language redundancy. E is found here, E is found here, E is found here, E is found here. But look at the substitutions that you see here. The first E is mapped to I. The second E is mapped to G. Again, I have this E mapped to G. Forgive me if I just mismatch any of them. Then this E is again mapped to T. Okay. So that means the problem with monoalphabetic substitution actually is relieved, but still you are not safe because as you move on, you can understand that after one point, then there is again a repetition. That is, E is substituted with I, then with T, and so on. That means you are able to find the period, okay, of the password and of the keyword, and you are able to break this. But still, for a very long period of time, this cipher was considered to be very strong because there is no one-to-one fixed correspondence between the plain text character and the cipher text character. You substitute E with I here, you substitute E with G here, and so on. Okay, that was the strength of this one. And there were some aids to help in this Wigner cipher. Somewhere you can see somewhat called a Wigner square. That is, basically it is like this. don't worry if I write this in capital and this is small. Okay, it doesn't have any meaning difference. So what you could see here is, if you have a plain text character A, okay, a plain text character A and a key R, it will be substituted with the letter R. It is equivalent to, you are taking the value of A, you are adding it with R, taking mode 26, you will get R itself. Okay, so that is the meaning. You have, it is just shown as a table itself. So it was easy for you, rather than doing the calculation, it was easy for you to find the answer. So this was Vigener cipher. This was a polyalphabetic cipher. And the last one is a one-time pad. Now coming to one-time pad, it is a truly random key as long as the message is used, and the cipher will be secure, right? So truly random key means, it is just like our one-time password, one-time key that you get while we do our transactions. That is, that key is no longer useful for the next transaction or for the next day, anything. So that is the concept of one-time pad. It is unbreakable since ciphertext bears no statistical relationship to the plain text. But choosing a key randomly, because for every plain text you need a new key, so there were problems in generation as well as a safe distribution of the key. So that was the problem with one time pad. So otherwise that also had a very good security towards the cipher. So these were the basic substitution techniques. That is, substitution techniques basically means you take a particular plain text character, you substitute that character with another character or a number, whatever. In our case, we have studied only characters. And the methods that were used were monoalphabetic ciphers. Then you had the Caesar cipher. Then you had the Playfair cipher. Then Hill cipher, then polyalphabetic cipher. In that you have studied Vigener cipher and a one-time pad. So the next category of encryption technique, classical encryption technique, was transposition ciphers. Transposition cipher means you will be just changing the positions of the letters. You are not substituting it with, you will be just rearranging the letters. That is transposition. So they hide the message by rearranging the letter order without altering the actual letters used. You can recognize these since they have the same frequency distribution as the original text. So it is not very difficult to identify. Anyway, that was a technique used. The first technique was rail fence cipher. So rail fence cipher means you will be given a message like this. See, uh, meet me after the toga party. Okay, that was your input. So you write the message letters diagonally over a number of rows. Then read off the cipher row by row. Like that is, see, look at the order in which you have written. Meet, okay, me after the toga party. So you are doing that diagonally, right? You're writing it diagonally over a number of rows. And after that, you will be reading it row by row. Once you have written like this, then you will be reading MEMATR like that. Look, MEMATRHT. Okay, this is, you just rearrange the letters. Okay, you followed a particular rule to rearrange the letters. And to get back the letter, what you do is, so the number of rows should be decided. Here I have taken only 2 rows. Suppose I am doing more rows, then that will be communicated between each other. Okay, how many rows should be written. Otherwise, what you do is, given this one, I will be again writing, okay, I'll be writing like this. Then I'll be writing again M, okay. I'll be writing in the row wise order itself. Sorry. I'll be writing like this in the same order. So M, E, M, A and all. Hmm. After that, I'll be writing it in the next row and I'll be coming up with the ciphertext. So this was rail fence cipher. So columnar transposition. In columnar transposition, you are following a key. So the key is given here, and based on the number of elements in the key, you will be forming that many number of columns, and consecutively that many number of rows. You will be forming a matrix. So you will be writing the letters of the message in a rectangle and read the message of column by column, but permute the order of the columns. So order of the columns becomes the key to the algorithm. So you have a key here, and you will be writing attack postponed until 2 a.m. You will be writing it in this order. So you will be following 7 columns, and after 7 columns you move to the next row, and so on. And the last three vacant positions are filled by bogus letters, that is X, Y, Z. Okay, the last three positions are filled by bogus letters X, Y, Z. And what you do is, you will be after writing like this, and your key also is written here. So you will be forming the ciphertext by reading it column by column in this order. That is, the column under number 1 will be taken TTNA. Then after that, under number 2, that is APTM. So you have APTM here. So APTM here. Then you have the third column TSUO. Then you have fourth column AODW. Then 5, 6, 7. So this is the ciphertext. Okay. And once you are given the ciphertext, um, how do you get back the plain text? That is, again you will be writing this key 4312567. You know this key that is shared between sender and receiver. So you will be taking the first 4 characters. So deciding the number of characters is based on the total number of characters in the ciphertext and the number of columns. You can definitely decide how many rows are there. So based on that, you decide how many uh, characters should be grouped here. So here you can understand that there are 4 rows, because total there will be 7 into 4, 28 letters. And there are 28 by 7, there will be 4 rows. So based on that, you will be grouping 4 elements, TTNA. You will be writing it under 1. Then you will be writing the next APTM under 2. Similarly, TSU under 3. And this goes on until you finish the last set of 4 characters. Okay. And after that, if you read it row wise, you will be getting the original plain text. So this is columnar transposition. And there are cases where you do a double columnar. This is single columnar transposition. Double columnar transposition means you will be writing this. You will be using the same key, and once you get this intermediate text, you will be again writing the TTNA, APTM row wise, and you will be again reading it column wise in this order. So you will be doing a double encryption. So that is double columnar transposition. So as we increase the levels of encryption, actually the strength of the cipher increases. Okay, so that is columnar transposition. Similarly, you have product ciphers also. Product ciphers using substitutions or transpositions are not secure because of this language characteristics. So several ciphers in succession in make harder. That is, you will be combining 2 substitutions or 2 transpositions, just before I mentioned double columnar, or you will be combining a transposition followed by a substitution techniques, or vice versa. So using a single technique won't suffice. So to increase the strength of the cipher, you might be combining multiple techniques or multiple scheme of the same technique, multiple substitution or multiple transposition, or a mix and match of substitution and transposition. Okay. So this is a bridge from classical to modern ciphers. So all these were part of the techniques that were used. Okay. Then another concept that you have to study here is, so these were the classical encryption techniques. Then there were other methods to perform encryption or to perform secret communication. It was called the rotor machines. So just before the modern ciphers, rotor machines were most common complex ciphers in use. It was widely used in World War II. So you might be familiar with the term Enigma, which was used during that time. So this is the basic figure of a rotor machine. So here you are making use of three cylinders, and three cylinders you will be having these 26 characters in these cylinders. So you have a spindle. While you are turning this one and you fix on it, it's just like a number lock. I've seen for certain cases you have a number lock, right? So you will be trying different combinations of the number lock to come up with the correct lock. The same thing is applicable in rotor machines also. So as we increase the number of cylinders, the number of combinations also will increase. That is the strength of rotor machine. So each rotor has 26 states, that is as many as the alphabet. At each state, there is a substitution cipher. The wiring between the contacts implement a fixed substitution of letters. Okay, and each cylinder rotates to change the states according to a different schedule. So if there are m cylinders, an m cylinder rotor machine, it has 26 raised to m different substitution ciphers. So this was the most famous rotor machine, Enigma. So this also was used just before the modern ciphers. So this was another figure of a rotor machine. You have a machine over here and the other components which help you to perform a secret communication. And another technique used was steganography. Steganography is actually you are hiding the message. Like you are given an image and inside that image you are embedding some messages into it so that nobody else can see that. Okay, so this was an alternative to encryption. It hides the existence of message. See, the difference between encryption and steganography is in encryption you are actually sending a ciphertext to the receiver. So when a third person looks as a communication happens between them, you can see that some message is transmitted between the sender and the receiver, but the message is not legible. It is in a scrambled manner. That is encryption. But in steganography, you do not even understand that communication is happening between them. So it is like there are cases where you are able to use invisible inks and you write something on a paper. And when you hold that paper near fire, these invisible letters will come up. That is that was a form of steganography. Similarly, if you are writing a particular text, certain characters in that text, if read together, will convey some message to you. Say the first character of every word. If you read the first character of every word in that paragraph, you will get some message out of it. So that is another example of steganography. So basically, in that, the third party will not know that a communication is being happened. He just sees that an image is being given or a letter with no specific message or any encryption. You can see nothing. But when it reaches the receiver side, the receiver will do some manipulation and he can bring out the hidden message from it. That is the concept of steganography. So this uses only a subset of letters or word in a longer message marked in some way using the invisible ink. Then as we move on, image processing is a very good area where or very good what method by which you perform steganography, hiding in LSB in a graphic image or sound file so that it is not evident to anybody else. But when we look into more details, you will understand that okay, there is some disturbance in the noise or there is some blurring in the image, and thereby you can understand that something is happening. So there is a high overhead to hide relatively um, uh, large bits actually. So that is steganography. So these were the classical techniques, and above that, to substitution and transposition, these were the techniques used to perform secure communication between two parties. So to summarize with, in part one, I gave you an introduction of cryptography, the terms used, then symmetric and asymmetric algorithms. Then we discussed about the classical encryption techniques, substitution cipher, transposition cipher. Then we studied about rotor machines and also steganography. So hope you have understood the topics covered in the session. Please go through the slides for better clarity. So have a nice day. Thank you.